Nigerian government says the economic reforms under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu are yielding positive reports. Speaking during an interactive session with the Senate Committee on Finance in Abuja, the country's Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, said the federal government appreciates the endurance of Nigerians on the side effects of the economic reforms. According to Mr. Edu, the teething problems from the reforms are over for Nigerians as a positive indicator for better days are already emerging. Besides the finance minister, the group executive officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mr. Mele Kyari, Director General of the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, AUPRC, Mr. Vega Komalafe, representatives of the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and others attended this session, which was later joined by the President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, in a closed door. Now, our first conversation today will be with a partner, a director, Tax Reporting and Strategy, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Kenneth Erikume. Mr. Erikume, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining the program.
Good afternoon, Tolu, and thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to our chat.
Yes, I think we need to start with updates on the present reforms and impact on Nigerians going forward. The report I read to precede this interview, government is saying that they are heads on. They are holding on to these reforms and believe that positives are already coming up one way or the other. What is your understanding of the present state of these reforms and, of course, the impact on Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Tolu. And, good afternoon to Nigerians. So Tolu, from my perspective, I think that Nigeria is probably the best case study of multifaceted economic challenges. So every ingredient of an economic challenge is what we're currently facing. So we have inflation probably at 33%. If you look at where we started in terms of the currency from around June 2023 to this year, we've had more than 100% devaluation. We also struggling with unemployment and underemployment, because it's not just about unemployment. There are people, based on their capacity and capability, they're able to deliver more, but they're not able to get those jobs. We also have skyrocketing debt burden. When you look at our debt currently, the external, the debt profile for the country as a whole, that's about 134 trillion, which is more than 600,000 naira per capita. And then we also have energy supply issues. We've, in the past couple of months, had fuel queues, and then more recently we've had repeated collapse of the electricity grid, and then corruption and security issues, and so on and so forth. And, how we've tackled these issues in the past is that we've employed unorthodox means by ensuring that we focusing more on things like import substitution strategy, which is useful. But then there was also over-reliance on the CBN to provide intervention and financing in, very specific sectors of the economy. And that meant that we also had to hold the exchange rate artificially, despite pressures. And, that's why you could see that there was a significant gap between the official market for the FX and the parallel market. So the key reforms being undertaken, and I think we've been feeling it as Nigerians. The two big ones are the devaluation of the free float of the naira, so that it's driven by demand and supply, and the removal of fuel subsidy. And then we've had bits and pieces of tariff suspensions and scrapping tariffs on certain imports to ease the burden. And we've also seen the CBN play a pivotal role in monetary policy. And if you look at the last, since the new CBN governor has come in, there has been interest rate tightening, and I think we've seen up to 850 basis points increases in the interest rate. So the CBN is also coming up with policies, monetary policies.
Sunday, let's have a bar for.
But in terms of the impact, we're beginning to see more impact. So the immediate impact we're seeing is a squeezing of the budget and rising inflation near 35%. This is the highest in 28 years. We've also seen the implications in terms of protests with soaring prices and economic hardship. And that has an impact in terms of security, both physical and cyber security. So the immediate impact is, such that there's been a bit of pain in the economy. But the long-term impact, if we do everything right, might be that, there might be some light at the end of the tunnel. We've shifted towards more orthodox means, economic policies, which aligns with some of the advice that we've gotten from the international community, like the IMF. At the time we're doing all of this, we also need to realize that Nigerians are feeling the pinch. So to ensure that there are palliatives and intervention that support the common man. But there is possibility that we could transform the landscape if reforms succeed in fostering sustainable growth and development. But there has to be the political will to address, corruption and fiscal discipline and things like transparency, if we intend for these reforms to succeed. Because it is not only the masses that have to contribute, the political class also have to contribute, and government also has to contribute. There has to be more value from government, so that the feeling of Nigerians when they engage government is not dissatisfaction and lack of quality and lack of service, which seems to be the current experience of most Nigerians. We have to raise the level of quality. We also have to deal with the issue of fiscal discipline so that our borrowings do not continue to escalate. We also need a bit more visibility and transparency around resource utilization at the subnational level if we are going to begin to see the positive outcomes from all these reforms. So that's my take, Tolu.
It's interesting to start on that very important note. Not just us as Nigerians, the political class also has a role to play in tightening their belts, just like the way they've instructed us to do. It's interesting. Let's look at interventions now. Before now, many would talk about palliatives and all of that. But now I think we should go beyond palliatives and look at specific interventions that would be inclusive and impactful. Two words there, inclusive and impactful. Now, we expect the likes of the NPC to be taking decisions very soon. Now, what do you think will shape conversation around that meeting, and what sort of interventions are running through your own mind?
Thank you, Tolu. To be honest, I suspect that everyone will be a bit cautious around increasing NPR again. Yeah. But I've been surprised before, when, after the MPC, we got advised that interest rates were increased. But interest rate adjustment, which is usually a tool that we see, is not one of the sort of strategies I would expect. I would want to see more supply side interventions, especially around food and energy, right? Because those are some of the areas where, the supply side impact of inflation are coming from. So, first of all, we need to mobilize more incentives towards those sectors. And also we need to have more targeted credit. in that space as well. We've also seen in recent times, a signaling by the central bank around the transparency of the FX market. Two of the things we've seen. The first one is the voluntary disclosure, that people holding, FX in their dorm account or in offshore accounts can come forward and voluntarily declare those FX assets. So we've seen that step. The other one we've also seen is the electronic foreign currency matching system that was announced last month. But the expectation is that there'll be a pilot for 2 weeks this month, and then it'll be fully rolled out in December. Those things signal something, that there is the feeling by the central bank that, despite the monetary policies they've implemented, they still need to do a bit more around having transparency over what is driving the FX demand, especially in the parallel market. So I think that we may see more actions or more steps taken in that direction. How drastic those will be is something I cannot predict. But those are some of the things I expect in terms of the outcome from the MPC.
Interesting. We'll keep a tab on that and see what happens after that very meeting. I know you've touched slightly on the foreign exchange market, but I want to ask that despite the efforts that we see by the Apex Bank to address this level of disparity that we see between the markets at the I&E window or directly from the banks and the other bank, the parallel market, which many businessmen will tell you that is where they source their FX from. Now, months after the institution of this new policy, what's your understanding of the FX rate? It's still been hovering between 1,600 and 1,700 to a dollar. And many will still tell you that this is not where we should be. Two-in-one question. What do you make of the scheme being instituted by the Apex Bank to address the dollar to naira disparity and all of that? And do you think our currency is appropriately priced?
All right, good questions and tough questions. Tough questions to do. I think our currency, when you look at the parallel market,
yes,
it gives you an indication of the right pricing of the currency, right? There is some artificiality built into the pricing premium, and this is not necessarily the transactions that goes through the official market. Now, let me take a step back and you begin to look at some data which has been put out there. Since the central bank began increasing interest rates, increasing MPR, if you look at the stats, and Nairametrics put something out, I think yesterday, it shows that personal loans has dropped by more than 50% when you compare with this time last year, right? It means that at the personal level, credit and liquidity is drying up, right? So the monetary policy of the central bank is having an effect. Now, if there is lack of credit and lack of liquidity at the personal level, it means that people will not, seek arbitrage by looking to put their naira, and buying foreign currency. So at the personal level, that has been dealt with, right? At the official market, right, which the central bank has sufficient visibility over, there is also some, transparency over that, and there seems to be some control over that, which means that there's something else driving that demand for FX that is neither, in the hands of, individuals at a very personal level and not with the businesses who seek the FX for importing raw materials or items for trade. So there is something in that black box that needs to be unpacked. And what you've seen from the central bank in terms of the voluntary disclosure and in terms of the electronic FX, market platform they're trying to implement, like I said, is a signaling at that, right? Because, remember that before the FX was left to, demand and supply, we had our exchange rate, I don't know what it was, maybe at 700 or something, and the parallel market at 900. The expectation is that when you free float, then everything would, even out at that 900. But there seems to be that demand, gap driving it, which is in that black box. And I think that is really the issue that government needs to really look at and deal with. And this is why I believe that, as part of some of the conversations, that will be something that the central bank would be looking at significantly. Do not forget that FX is, the impact of FX, if government is able to get it right, it's going to have a ripple effect across the full chain of the economy. So the amount of subsidy on lack of subsidy that government would have to incur, in order to ensure that product gets supplied to citizens would reduce, because we are largely an import-dependent country. Food, energy, and everything would also benefit from that FX reduction. So it seems to be like the most critical component that government needs to address. Now, if we park that black box, or whatever we want to, and then begin to look at the other things that government needs to do, crude production needs to be ramped up. Obviously, we need to ensure that the oil and gas assets that we have are fully commercialized. They're in full production. We reduce vandalism and sabotage of our production and get our crude exported. That would ensure that we create more liquidity in the market. The other thing, which is obvious for all of us, is that in terms of, for many years, one of the key things we knew we had to deal with is our demand for petroleum products. So if you look at the stats, more than 30% of our imports is on petroleum products and petrochemicals. So government has to really look at that. And, there were hopes that the Dangote refinery will bring in some solace to Nigerians, because then you have the benefit of beneficiation in that value chain that you're producing. You have the commodity which is produced, but you do all the value addition in country, and then the citizens are able to benefit from all that. You conserve your foreign currency, and you ensure that you create more value domestically. So there's an expectation, and I see that this issue has been on for a few months now. But once we are able to settle, and or the Dangote refinery is able to settle, and the petroleum marketers are able to settle and find that equilibrium, and potentially products are purchased from Dangote refinery in Naira, then we'll begin to see some benefits on that side as well. So I think that these are the three priorities. If I was sitting in government and I said, okay, what should I call an emergency on? It would be those three things. Ramping up food production, dealing with the issue of value creation around the Dangote refinery, and of course dealing with the would I call it corrupt or maybe corrupt is a bit of an aggressive word, but there is that demand in the parallel market that may not be driven by commerce that we also need to look at. So these are my priorities and my thoughts.
Well, we have 2 minutes to wrap up this segment. The tax bill is something that I like your comments on. Can we wrap up on that note? What do you make of this back and forth that we have? I know 2 minutes is not enough for you to speak around this, but just give us a summary around that. Maybe we'll take it up some other time.
Yeah, so the tax bill, like you said, it's a lot. But I think what you're really seeking is this question around the VAT and the sharing formula and the thing and the likes, right? So for me, based on my experience, doing this, consultancy for many years, is that there is a benefit to stakeholder engagement and a conversation around matters. There's always room for improvement of our systems and our processes. One of the things that an engagement around VAT would drive is what we call fiscal competition, as well as driving more productivity within the states, right? So when you begin to look at derivation and the value created from the location of source and the location of consumption, that would stimulate healthy competition among states. Now you would see in the US, for example, that some states that do not have resources or the benefit of being economic capitals and things like that, then look inwards and say, can we do something different? Can we begin to look at something like casinos and gaming? So when you look at Nevada as an example, that is the driver, and tourism as well. That is the driver of the economy, because they now need to look inwards and drive productivity. And then you look at a place like Delaware, having to grant incentives to attract holdco structures and funding into the state. We need to have a rethink and an engagement on these matters. There is no one right answer to this issue, but I think it will be healthy as Nigeria for us to engage on the matter and find the right solution. Of course, balancing it with the fact that you have to protect some states that do not have a good head start. They are not Lagos, they are not Abuja, but require us to protect them and ensure that even while they figure out what they need to focus on economically, they are also sustainable states. So that will be my take, and I know it's a bit political, but that's the way to go.
I must thank you so much, Mr. Kenneth Erikume, the Partner Director, Tax Reporting Strategy, PricewaterhouseCoopers. We always appreciate you on the show. Thanks for your contributions. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Tolu.
Well, interesting conversation. You will agree with me. Coming up on the show, let's look at the implications economically. Donald Trump's presidency. Let's focus